How's it going? And welcome to No Fun Alloved's guide series on Candlekeep Mysteries, a 5th edition module. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the explosive Candlekeep Dekonstruction. Of course, there is going to be a ton of spoilers. Players don't watch this, but DMs that want to shoot to the moon, go ahead and stick around because we have a lot to go over. And as always, our adventure begins in Candlekeep itself. The interesting thing is, normally your players find a book, the book just happens to land in the palm of their hands, and this is no different, as a book is going to appear in their hands, but it is not going to be from some random entity. It is going to be from a person who is going to keel over dead. Our adventure begins with your players being approached by a 1 Buron Stern Metal. He is going to keel over dead. Your players are going to investigate what the heck is going on. And your players may do a bunch of things. This is a higher level adventure, so your players may get creative here. They may try to revivify him or do something else. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to return, so bringing him back to life is not going to happen. But your players can cast Speak with the Dead on him, and they can uncover a lot of interesting clues. Of course, we're detailed a lot of this information out in the Speaking with the Dead category. But if your players don't have that on hand, or they just don't think about it, they can immediately look at what's going on here. Your players will see a book that the dwarf was carrying, and your players may look at this book and see that it is labeled Candlekeep Dekonstruction. They can look at this thing, however, this thing is very technical. It's going to require a DC 25 Arcana check to truly understand what is going on here. If they fail, they don't know. But if they succeed, then they know that there is a tower somewhere that is in fact a rocket. Of course, someone dying in the middle of a Candlekeep is bad news, so supposedly someone's going to figure it out at some point. Maybe your players just go ahead and say, hey, this guy killed over dead. Avowed are going to clean the body up, and they'll definitely try and take the book away from the party. Your players, after seeing this book, or maybe even talking with this individual, are going to discover that it leads to the barn door. The barn door, they may ask the Avowed about what it is, and what really it comes down to is this place has been cordoned off for some time. It hasn't seen any use. However, semi-recently, there's been some strange noise emanating out from it, but not enough to cause great concern, which is a little bit odd if there is noise coming from a vacant place in the middle of Candlekeep. Do they think that they're squatters or something and they just don't care? Whatever the case may be, your players will probably be curious and lead to further investigation. Something important to note here before we get to the earthquake is we have this beautiful, beautiful rendition of Candlekeep. We get this excellent detailed color map, but we don't get the exact location on where the barn door is. So that's entirely left up to you. I would suggest that it be a tower that isn't sticking out from any other major building. Make sure that it's a building on its own. Because this book has been stolen, the ringleader of this whole event has hit that launch button, and then an earthquake is going to erupt in all of Candlekeep. This is going to cause great alarm because no one has felt an earthquake in quite some time. These people obviously don't live in California. Your players may be curious as to what caused this earthquake, and they can make a DC 14 Arcana or Nature check, and they will determine that it is a natural earthquake, not caused by magic. Which is technically true, you know, it is mechanisms, it's not a earthquake spell or anything of that nature. Hopefully with this earthquake and the news that there is this barn door and this dwarf came from it and killed over, your players will go and investigate the barn door. They need to get permission first, but that is easily settled, as Bookworm, the first reader of Candlekeep, gives your players permission to go and scout the place out. And in fact, what's really awesome here is your players, if they just went to the barn door by itself, they wouldn't be able to get in. But Bookworm tells them the secret word to get them inside. Something important to note about this adventure is that time is an extremely important factor. After that earthquake happens, there is exactly 1 hour and counting for that rocket to kick off. So during the course of the investigation and the roleplay and the combats, you should keep track of how much time is going off. Because if you want to run this purely as written, then yeah, go ahead and have it run for 1 hour. But what I'm going to tell you at the very end of this is several ways we can make sure that you get the most bang for your buck out of this adventure. After talking with Bookworm, it is going to take 5 minutes to get to the barn door. Once your players arrive, then they'll be able to speak the phrase aloud, make their way inside, and start investigating the place. And it is here in Stonkys Cult where we get some good information about all the individuals that are located inside. Now, this is a higher level adventure, so normally you would be going up against crazy, ridiculous monsters. But here your players are going up against cultists and cult fanatics, which are things that they were going at, at levels 2, 3, maybe even 4. So your players will be able to deal with the cultists no problem. It's the skitter widgets that your players may have a bigger issue with. Before we get any further with the video though, I just want to give a huge shout out to all my amazing Patreons up here. You guys are helping me out so very much. Thank you. Absolutely incredible. Thank you for all the amazing stuff that you're doing. I am putting out some content as well, and stay tuned on Patreon because I am going to be announcing some fun Candlekeep stuff going on over there. For the barn door features, we get ceilings, cleanliness, doors and windows, and light. The important thing to note here is that there is windows, but they are made of a magical metal. It is a transparent metal called glass steel, and this is a big deal because, of course, if this thing goes off into space, then the glass would not cut it. In Area 1, we have the library. This place is closed with an arcane lock, and your players will be told the word for Jeopardy to open the door. If they are not told this, then they need to use a knock spell or a DC 30 athletics check to bust their way inside. Inside the library, your players will find 3 cultists that are cleaning this place up before the grand finale and release into space. They are going to attack intruders. So there's something very important to note here is these people are weak compared to the party. They are just merely cultists and they are armed with brooms. So it's not going to be perceived as deadly. Hopefully your players are on the good side of things and knock these people out, but they could as easily just kill all of them in a single round. The important thing to note is that the cultists are fanatical. They are not going to give in. They're not going to surrender. They believe what they are doing is right and they're going to fight to the death. So the only way they're ever going to divulge any information here is if they are charmed into doing so. Once your players have dealt with the cultist, if your players search around, they can make a DC 13 perception check and find the secret door that leads to the underlevel below. But we'll continue on with the rest of the tower here. In Area 2, we have the main room. Your players make their way upstairs and they'll see a whole bunch of chairs laid out and a whole bunch of rope. These ropes are in fact seatbelts because they know that when the rocket kicks off, then people are going to be flying everywhere. So when they walk in, they're going to immediately see 4 cultists sitting down and ready to go. These 4 are completely restrained and cannot free themselves, so they're not going to be able to fight back, and once again, they are fanatical, so they're not going to talk unless they are magically compelled to do so. However, if your players have the magic to compel them, then we get some nice bulletin points on what the cultists will tell the party. In Area 3, we have Stonkys Study. Your players can only make their way inside of here if they have a knock spell or, once again, a DC 30 athletics check. So realistically, there are a lot of groups that would not be able to break inside of here. Inside of this room, your players can find a pretty nifty list here, and this list will definitely detail out what's going on. Test rockets, separate barn door from foundation, set correct coordinates, etc, etc. Deductive players are going to see this list and realize what's going on, that this place is about to blast off. Also inside of this room, your players will be able to find several interesting books. One of Hero's Feast, which is an incredibly powerful book. If your players spend a short rest reading this thing, then they can actually cast the Hero's Feast spell. Of course, if they spend any time attuning to anything or spending a short rest to do whatever, then they are going to have that rocket launch. They can also find Stonky Knobstopper's Spells of Plenty, which is a spell book, and they can also find Trobriand's Machinations Volume 10. This is what Stonky used to create his own skitter widgets. Tucked away in Stonky's spell book is a list of navigation notes. He doesn't know exactly what they are, but he knows that he needs to plug in a number anywhere between 626 and 666. In Area 4, we have the Observatory. Your players climb their way all the way up the stairs, and they can see that there is this grand telescope and a whole bunch of strange things going on here. If anyone other than Stonky tampers with the telescope or the steering wheel, then 3 lightning golems are going to emerge and attack the party. This is a really cool reflavoring of flesh golems and provides a neat distraction for your players to not mess with everything that's going on here. In addition to that combat, if anybody activates the lever that is located inside of here, then they are going to activate a Glyph of Warding. They can spot this Glyph of Warding with a DC 16 investigation check. However, if they do not spot it, then they are engulfed in lightning. Everybody in the room must make a DC 16 dexterity saving throw, or take 8d8 points of lightning damage, or half on a success. The glyph disappears after the spell is triggered. This lever can be moved to 3 different positions: coop, shed, and stable. It's currently in the stable position, which means the barn door is going to blast off when the countdown timer reaches 0, but your players could delay this by moving into the shed position, in which case it's delayed for as long as the lever just sits there. Or it can be moved all the way to coop, and the timer is going to shut off, and this place cannot kick off for another 24 hours, which is pretty much going to end any hope of this thing kicking off. In addition to that, there is the steering wheel, which is currently set to 646 because Stonky knows that anywhere between 626 to 666 is good. So your players could theoretically move that dial around. They could move it either left or right outside of those numbers, and what that means later on is if this thing kicks off, then it is going to crash. After a thorough investigation of this tower or some interrogation of the cultist, your players may be able to discover that there is an underlevel to this location. So let's go ahead and check out under the barn. So the reason why there are several cultists still underneath the tower and not inside of the tower getting all prepped is the fact that Stonky has lost his ring and he's trying to look for it. This is a ring of telekinesis, which also doubles as a controller for several of the skitter widgets, but not all of them. We'll be getting to that in a moment. In area 1, we have the descending staircase. Nothing really important to note here, except for the fact that when the rocket kicks off, a wall of stone is going to magically erupt, and it's definitely going to cook up whoever is unfortunately trapped down there when the rocket kicks off. In area 2, we have rocket boosters. This is where your players descend down. They are going to be assailed by several skitter widgets. This is a big deal because skitter widgets are a brand new monster, and that's always fun, and they are actually pretty scary. They could theoretically stun lock the entire party, and unfortunately your players may just find themselves in a death spiral. But once again, I'll be getting into some of the finer details about this adventure at the very end. Underneath these cylinders, there's a lot of heat pouring out, and in fact, once your players have enough time looking around here, they'll see several scorch marks. So you should immediately tell them, hey, that looks extremely hot, you don't want to go near it. And if naturally someone goes near it, then they just immediately take 4d6 points of fire damage. There's a double door leading further beyond, and unfortunately this thing is locked. It is going to require a DC 15 dexterity check with thieves tools, or a DC 22 athletic check to bust it down. And once again, I like how it states here that this takes time, as it should. So using thieves tools takes a minute, and I would also say trying to bust this thing down maybe also takes a minute, as you try and just throw yourself at this thing again and again. Also located inside of this area are kitty widget nests. So if your players spend a decent amount of time looking through these things, they can find several kitty widgets. And this is pretty cool because once again, new monsters, but 2, skitter widgets are very protective of their children. And in fact, they are so protective that if you threaten any kitty widget, then the skitter widget might be able to back off and not threaten the party anymore. In area 3, we have the unlit hallway. Your players make their way through those double doors, and there they're going to see it. A massive creature crawling its way through the darkness. They just fought one bug-like creature, so them seeing another creature is probably going to put them on edge. You have them roll initiative, but this thing is just an illusion. So it's a great way to waste your players' resources as they immediately try and hit this thing or do whatever. Make sure that you tell them that whenever this thing gets hit, it doesn't react in any way because it is just an illusion. In Area 4, the Forge, this is where, of course, a lot of the forging takes place. There's currently nobody inside of here, but your players can find an owlbear which they can sell, or use, or keep, or whatever. In Area 5, we have Stonky's missing ring. In this room, there is a well, but at the bottom of it is not water, but a pool of acid. Pretty gnarly stuff. If your players make their way inside of here, then they're just immediately going to take 66 points of acid damage at the start of every one of their turns. There is a lever located right next to the well, which will drain it. Draining it takes 1 whole minute, but once it is drained, they can see at the bottom a whole bunch of carcasses of skitter widgets, but they'll also be able to see that magical ring. Once again, this does require attunement, so if your players do attune themselves to it, guess what? That rocket's kicking off, unless they've stalled the rocket launch. In Area 6, we have the workshop. Your players make their way inside of here and they'll see a whole bunch of fantastical things, but they'll also be able to see 3 skitter widgets as well as 3 cult fanatics if they have not been drawn elsewhere. Once again, this is actually a pretty scary fight. 3 cult fanatics and 3 skitter widgets. That's a lot of potential stuns and grapples and a lot of damage coming out. Mind you though, when the combat immediately kicks off, those 3 cult fanatics are going to be searching high and low, presumably crawling all about trying to find the ring that is missing. After dealing with the combatants inside of here, your players can make a thorough search in here, which is going to take 10 whole minutes, but if they do, they can find a whole bunch of gold worth of gizmos. In Area 7, we have Stonkys Command Center. So, once again, another locked door. This is really hard to overcome because it needs a knock spell or a DC 30 athletics check. But the interesting thing to note here is that Stonky is so incredibly wrapped up in trying to find the ring that he is not paying any attention. If anybody knocks on the door, then he'll go ahead and open it up. So unlike the other cultists who are just going to attack and try to repel anybody, Stonky is just going to automatically assume that the party is in on it, and he's going to reveal his grand plan. That he wants to go out into space and make sure that the books don't fall into the vile hands of those who don't deserve it, and have a grand old time. He is going to reveal all this information to the party because he is crazy. He thinks that they're in on it, and he thinks that what he's doing is the bee's knees. There is a safe inside of this room, and it requires a tremendous effort to open this thing. But the funny thing is that this thing is empty because Stonky is getting ready to go. Stonky has several minor trinkets on him, nothing too major, but he does have a note on him which is Coop Abort, Shed Delay, and Stable Blastoff. So if your players didn't know what to do with that lever up above, and they come here, then they're going to know what to do. And lastly, here we get some great information on Stonky Knobstopper on how to roleplay him, his trait, ideal, bond, and flaw. And of course, look at this beautiful art. Look at that Blastoff. That is totally incredible. For the Blastoff section here, we get all the detailed information about what happens when that Blastoff occurs. If you are underneath the rockets, then you're going to take a whopping 24 d10 points of fire damage, and it's going to be gnarly. And any creature that is inside of the tower that's not held in place is going to take 3d6 points of bludgeoning damage and fall prone. And we get all this great info about what your players could theoretically do if they are inside of the rocket. They could use a spell scroll of teleportation circle, or maybe they just jump or do whatever. We also have some information about launch delayed or aborted. If your players stave off this thing, then congratulations, they saved the rocket and maybe even saved the cultists if they're not trying to kill them. And lastly here we have the skitter widget problem. If the skitter widgets are not cold, then they could reproduce too much and put Candlekeep in all of danger. Your players could try and take over any of the skitter widgets that are still left around if they have that ring attuned, but the offspring of the skitter widgets won't fall into command, and they will also keep on reproducing. So your players are going to have to do something about it. And reproduce, they are good at. It takes 3d6 hours for an impregnated skitter widget to give birth, after which the skitter widget will grow to adult size in 10 days. It can then reproduce another 3d6 days later. So you can see how this thing will spiral out of control if it is not dealt with. So I want to talk a bit about the Blastoff. This adventure can go a number of ways depending on how your players approach this. The rocket could not get blasted off and things just wrap up right there. Your players could see the thing blast off and just wave goodbye. This thing could blast off with your players inside of it. There is several ways this place can run out. I'm going to tell you, I personally think that the most epic, awesome way to have this encounter play out is your players being inside of the rocket when this thing blasts off into space, because that is awesome, right? If you're running this as a one-shot, you can definitely shoehorn this in using some cutscenes and ensure that your players are inside when the blast-off occurs, and then any number of things could happen. Your players may decide to jump ship and get out of here before the thing goes into space. Maybe your players get into space and try and figure out how to get back home. Maybe it just ends right there with your players in space and piloting a spaceship and maybe trying to get into some Spelljammer stuff. Who knows? If your players do stop the launch, then yeah, that's great. They definitely make sure that this place doesn't get damaged. They make sure that the cultists probably get some help as they are probably insane. Maybe they can get some rehab or something. You know, it is a good ending if they stop the launch and ensure that everybody lives. But of course, I just think that it is super epic if they are part of that launch. I mean, heck, that art piece shows it off right there. Don't you want to show that art to your players? Of course, your players could fight up this thing and then go down this thing, not stop the launch, and then they see that this thing launches off into space with them being left behind. I think that's also a pretty fun ending. You can have Stonky sitting right there saying, "No, I wanted to be a part of that." And that'll be a fun time too, knowing that there's a whole bunch of cultists that are now in space and wondering what the heck they're getting up to. So, of course, the fights on the upper levels aren't really that much of a challenge. The cultists are no big deal at all, and realistically, the lightning golems aren't going to knock out the entirety of the party. They can, of course. It is D&D, anything can happen. But more than likely, they're going to succeed. It is the skitter widgets here in area U2 where your players could theoretically just get stun locked to death and unfortunately beaten. What I would say though is that these things don't aim to kill. I would say that these things aim to knock people out, because I think that is, once again, more fun if you knock out the party and bring them along for the ride. When your players wake up from a comatose state, they look around and see that they're in space. You know, that is a fun adventure right there. Then they have to figure out, okay, how do we get away from these cultists? How do we get back home? What the heck are we gonna do? That is, once again, just another fun adventure to have. This adventure works great as a one-shot. It works great as being added to an adventure. There is just so much fun to be had with this. As stated, this thing is a palate cleanser. This is a mystery, but it is an action-packed mystery, and I love it. So go ahead and tell me, do you plan on having this rocket kick off, or are you going to allow your players to stop this thing from ever leaving the surface? Are your players going to be lethal to the cultists, or are your players softies and going to knock them all out? And will your players be able to talk reason into the mad Stonky? Go ahead and tell me all those things because I want to know. That's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.